Imagine you're trekking through the steaming jungles of ancient Madagascar 66 million years ago. The ferns rustle near your feet. You freeze, expecting a deadly dinosaur to lunge at your throat. Instead, out waddles a crocodile. But it doesn't try to kill you. It has a nose like a pug, armor like a tank, and it's completely ignoring you to violently attack a salad. Meet Simosuchus, the vegetarian crocodile that proves nature has a wicked sense of humor. Imagine you've been dropped into the middle of a dense, sweltering forest. The air is thick enough to chew on, and the humidity is wreaking absolute havoc on your hair. Welcome to Madagascar, roughly 66 million years ago. Now, if you know anything about the late Cretaceous, you know it wasn't exactly a petting zoo. This island had been drifting alone in the Indian Ocean for millions of years, becoming a laboratory for evolution's strangest experiments. Over in the clearing, you might spot a Majungasaurus, a predator so aggressive paleontologists are pretty sure it occasionally ate its own siblings. It's the kind of place where everything looks like it wants to kill you, mainly because everything usually does. So when you hear a heavy rustling in the ferns down by your feet, you probably instinctively reach for a weapon. The leaves part and out waddles a reptile. It's covered in armor plates, it has a tail like a heavy log, and it's undeniably a crocodile. But something is off. It doesn't have that long, toothy grin of a Nile crocodile. Instead, it has a short, blunt face that looks like it ran headfirst into a parked car. Honestly, if a crocodile decided to cosplay as a pug, this is exactly what it would look like. This is Simosuchus, and it is arguably the cutest thing to ever crawl out of the Mesozoic era. Paleontologists have spent decades arguing over exactly how Madagascar's isolation produced such bizarre creatures, a phenomenon often called the island effect, where animals evolve into strange shapes to fill empty ecological niches. But while most crocodiles of this era were terrifying apex predators lurking in the shallows waiting to death roll a dinosaur, Simosuchus was doing something very different on dry land. Here's the thing though. You might be backing away, expecting this armored tank puppy to lunge at your ankle. But it completely ignores you. It walks right past your trembling legs, opens that boxy snout, and violently attacks a fern. To understand just how weird this fern-munching behavior is, you have to look at the hardware Simosuchus was working with. If you were to construct a predator from scratch, you'd give it long jaws for snapping and sharp conical teeth for holding on to struggling prey. Simosuchus took that blueprint, crumpled it up, and threw it in the trash. Let's put that into perspective. Most crocodiles are hydrodynamic torpedoes. Simosuchus, on the other hand, was built like a brick. It measured only about 2.5 feet long, roughly the size of a medium dog or a very aggressive coffee table. It had a short, deep skull that gave it that distinct pug-nosed profile, and its eyes were positioned on the sides of its head, not the top. That's a classic prey adaptation, by the way. If you're a hunter, you want eyes in front to focus on dinner. If you are dinner, you want eyes on the side to spot the guy trying to eat you. Its body was encased in a suit of heavy armor called osteoderms. These bony plates didn't just cover its back, they wrapped around its tail and limbs, turning it into a walking fortress. It was arguably the most heavily armored crocodile to ever live relative to its size. Historians and scientists still argue whether this excessive plating was purely for defense against the terrifying theropods of Madagascar, or if it also played a role in thermoregulation, acting like solar panels to soak up the Cretaceous heat. But the weirdest part of its anatomy, and the smoking gun for its lifestyle, is hidden inside that boxy mouth. See, typical crocodile teeth are simple spikes. They are designed for one thing: puncture, and hold. They are terrible at chewing. That's why modern crocs do that violent death roll, to rip off chunks of meat they can swallow whole. Simosuchus didn't have spikes. Now for the part nobody expects. If you pried open the jaws of this ancient reptile, which I don't recommend, it would still pinch, you wouldn't find daggers. You would find teeth shaped like maple leaves. They were multi-cusped, with little serrated edges, almost identical to the teeth of modern iguanas. These weren't weapons of war, they were precision garden shears. This specific tooth shape is a biological neon sign that screams, "I eat plants." It allowed Simosuchus to grind down tough vegetation, a complex chewing motion that modern crocodiles simply cannot do. While its cousins were out terrorizing the waterways, this little guy was happily turning the terrifying jungle of Madagascar into a salad bar. So we have a short, chubby, plant-eating crocodile wandering around a landscape dominated by top-tier predators. On paper, Simosuchus sounds less like a successful species and more like a prehistoric chicken nugget waiting to be dipped in sauce. It lived in a semi-arid, seasonal environment. Think of it like the modern African savanna, but with more ferns and fewer lions, where resources could get scarce. Because it was cold-blooded, ectothermic, Simosuchus couldn't just run around all day burning calories. It had to manage its energy budget carefully. Mornings likely started with a slow crawl into a patch of sunlight to warm up those armored plates, kind of like waiting for your car engine to heat up in winter. Once its internal temperature hit the sweet spot, it would spend the day browsing low-growing vegetation, happily crunching on whatever scrubby plants the dinosaurs ignored. But being a ground-level grazer came with a massive occupational hazard. You are constantly at ankle-biting height for everything else. Paleontologists have found fossils of Simosuchus that are incredibly well preserved, which gives us a clue about how they might have died, or rather, how they lived to avoid being eaten. The shape of that pug nose wasn't just for looks. The skull structure suggests heavy neck muscles and a reinforced snout, which has led to a fascinating theory. Historians and scientists still argue whether Simosuchus was a fossorial animal, fancy talk for a creature that digs burrows. If you're a slow-moving reptile in a world of giants, the best defense is simply not being there when the predator arrives. It's very likely that at the first sign of trouble, Simosuchus didn't run. It vanished into the earth. Imagine a badger, but scaly and significantly less grumpy. This burrowing lifestyle would explain why so many of their skeletons are found intact. They might have been buried in their own dens during flash floods, preserved perfectly for us to find millions of years later. Here is a weird little fringe detail for you. Unlike modern crocodiles, which sprawl out with their bellies on the mud, Simosuchus had limbs that tucked slightly under its body. This is called a semi-erect gait. It wasn't galloping like a horse, but it could probably hustle with a surprising amount of stiffness, like a toddler running in a snowsuit. But you've been lied to. We've been conditioned by movies to think of plant eaters as the passive victims of the prehistoric world, nature's vending machines for the carnivores. You see a triceratops or a stegosaurus and you think, food. But Simosuchus suggests that being a vegetarian didn't make you a pushover. That armor we talked about, it wasn't just thick skin, it was a structural roll cage. The osteoderms were so tightly interlocked that Simosuchus was practically rigid. If a predator like Rhonovis, a raptor-like bird, or a juvenile Majungasaurus tried to take a bite, they wouldn't just be biting skin, they'd be biting a rock. It's the armadillo strategy. If you can't outrun the danger, you become so annoying to eat that the predator gives up and goes to find something softer. Simosuchus essentially weaponized being difficult. It was the evolutionary equivalent of a stale jawbreaker. Technically food, but is it really worth the dental work? If Simosuchus feels like a glitch in the matrix to you, a crocodile that forgot how to be a crocodile, it's only because our modern perspective is incredibly limited. We look at a Nile crocodile or an American alligator and think, okay, that's what a croc is. A flat, water-loving ambush predator. But if you zoomed out to the Cretaceous period, specifically in the southern supercontinent of Gondwana, you'd realize that Simosuchus wasn't a freak accident. It was just one character in a whole cast of evolutionary madness. This was the Golden Age of the Notosuchians. Think of modern crocodiles like a reliable, heavy-duty pickup truck. They are great at one specific job, hauling prey into water. And they haven't changed the design much because it works. But the Notosuchians, they were the experimental concept cars at an auto show. Evolution was throwing everything at the wall to see what stuck. You had Caprisuchus, widely known as the boar croc, which had 3 sets of tusk-like fangs projecting up and down from its snout. Unlike our sluggish modern crocs, this nightmare likely galloped on land with the speed and aggression of a caffeinated wild boar. Then there was Armadillosuchus, which, you guessed it, evolved heavy, sliding armor bands and likely dug for roots and bugs, behaving almost exactly like a modern armadillo, just with more teeth and less charm. The variety was staggering. While dinosaurs were busy dominating the large predator niches, crocodiles were essentially filling every other job opening available. There were carnivorous land-crocs, herbivorous pug-crocs, and even omnivorous rat-crocs. Speaking of rats, here is a fringe tidbit that usually blows people's minds. Some of these crocodiles were trying remarkably hard to be mammals. Take Pachysuchus, the cat croc. It was a small, nimble animal with a very unreptilian feature: complex teeth. Most reptiles just have rows of identical spikes. Pachysuchus had canines, premolars and molars that slotted together perfectly when it closed its mouth. This implies it could chew and process food just like a mammal. It was essentially a reptile doing a perfect impression of a weasel, millions of years before weasels even existed. This explosion of diversity leads to a massive question in paleontology. Historians and scientists still argue whether Notosuchians were the reason early mammals stayed so small for so long in the southern hemisphere. In the north, mammals were kept down by dinosaurs. But in the south, it's very possible that every time a mammal tried to evolve into a larger, badger-sized niche, it got bullied out of existence by a hyper-specialized land crocodile. So why don't we have galloping crocodiles or pug crocs today? Here's the thing though. We love to call crocodiles living fossils. You'll hear it on every nature documentary. Unchanged for millions of years, perfect killing machines. It sounds like a compliment, but it's actually a lie by omission. Modern crocodiles aren't the peak of their lineage. They are just the survivors. They represent only one tiny, specific sliver of the massive crocodile family tree, the semi-aquatic ambush sliver. All the cool, weird, experimental land crocs, the runners, the diggers, the vegetarians, were wiped out. The living fossil label ignores the fact that crocodiles used to be arguably the most diverse and adaptable group of reptiles on the planet. Simosuchus wasn't the weirdo. In the context of the Cretaceous, the water-bound ancestors of modern crocs were the ones lacking imagination. The party finally ended 66 million years ago. And it ended with a bang. Specifically a 6-mile-wide rock slamming into the Yucatan Peninsula. The KPG extinction event is famous for wiping out the non-avian dinosaurs, but it also decimated the Notosuchians. Simosuchus, for all its clever adaptations, had one fatal flaw in this new apocalyptic world. It was a specialist. It relied on a steady supply of fresh vegetation and a warm climate to keep its metabolism going. When the asteroid impact kicked up enough dust to block out the sun, global temperatures plummeted and the plants withered away. Simosuchus didn't stand a chance. Its armor could stop a raptor, but it couldn't stop an ecosystem collapse. So, how did the boring ancestors of modern crocodiles survive when the cool pug crocs didn't? It comes down to location and diet. Being semi-aquatic turned out to be the ultimate survival bunker. Water has a high heat capacity, meaning it acts as a buffer against rapid temperature swings, and even the initial heat wave of the impact. Furthermore, while the food chain on land crashed the moment the plants died, freshwater ecosystems are often driven by detritus, rotting organic matter. And if there was one thing the asteroid provided in abundance, it was dead stuff. Historians and scientists still argue whether the slow metabolism of these river crocs was the primary factor that saved them, or if it was simply dumb luck that they lived in the one environment that didn't completely shut down. They could simply float in the dark, slowing their heart rates, waiting for the world to heal, while their terrestrial cousins vanished. Now for the part nobody expects. The extinction of Simosuchus is actually a personal tragedy for humanity. Think about it. We spent thousands of years domesticating wolves into pugs and wildcats into house cats. Simosuchus had already done the hard work for us. It was small, it was a vegetarian, it was slow-moving, and it was armored against clumsy toddlers. If this lineage had squeezed through the extinction bottleneck, there is a non-zero chance that today you would be taking a scaly, tail-wagging log for a walk at the local park. We missed out on the perfect low-maintenance pet by a mere quirk of geological history. Instead, we got the river monsters. Nature kept the killers and deleted the friendly ones. It's a harsh reminder that evolution isn't about the best or coolest design winning. It's just about who can hold their breath the longest when the sky falls. So, next time you see a crocodile lurking in the water, don't just see a monster. See it as the last remaining echo of a time when its cousins ruled the land, ate flowers, and looked incredibly confused. If you want to support the channel and help us dig up more weird history, hitting that subscribe button is the best way to do it.